Hi, this is Ivey from Just Adventure, and I'm here to tell you about a new game called Infra. And here's the thing about Infra, it's not very much fun to play. Do you ever play one of those games that keeps reminding you of better games? Well, that happened to me a lot while playing Infra Part 1. In Infra, you play a civil engineer, or maybe he's a mechanical engineer, a structural analyst whose job it is to spend a very long day, checking on various infrastructure problems around a large Baltic city. So, yeah, that's the whole game. Wandering around derelict lumber mills, steel foundries, dams, and water treatment plants. You're not supposed to fix them exactly as much as to move through them and note the damage with your camera. And the game is exactly as much fun as that sounds. There's so much wrong with this game, it's hard to know where to begin. But let's start with one of my favorite things to complain about, the voice acting. The game was made by a team from Finland. It started out as simply a modding project using the Source engine and then eventually grew into a game. Now, many quality adventure games come from Europe, of course, and I love and support indie developers. But if you are going to sell your game in the English-speaking market, you've got to take localization seriously. And the folks behind Infra, sadly, did not. The voice acting is performed by folks who are clearly not only non-English speakers, but lousy actors as well. It's not a charming combination. In fact, it's quite painful and distracting. If you don't believe me, take a gander at a bit of this.
I'm not saying we'll be here all day, but some of the places you're about to survey are in exceptionally bad shape, so we might as well be prepared for the worst. Also, the maintenance reports we received from the municipality council yesterday seemed incomplete. So either those reports have gone missing, or there never was any maintenance done to begin with.
Sounds great.
Exactly. So be extra careful out there. And I want everyone wearing their helmets today.
It's just as bad when the game's written materials, which are rife with bungled language to the point of incomprehensibility. In my favorite example, I kept seeing posters about a missing dock, D-O-C-K. I saw it several times before I realized that it meant missing dog. Come on, guys. Google Translate would have done a better job of localizing your game, and for free. Now, you might think I'm being overly harsh here. I love Finland. I've been to Helsinki, which is a beautiful city, and the actors in the game certainly speak far better English than I speak Finnish. But this is the grown-up world of business. If you are going to ask people to shell out money for your game on the open market, you need to play by the grown-ups' rules. And that means properly localizing your game. Format-wise, the game is very reminiscent of The Disappearance of Ethan Carter and Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, in that it's fully rendered in 3D using the aforementioned Source engine. And like those games, it's got some lovely environments. Unlike those games, however, you don't get to spend much time in those lovely environments. You may have seen promo materials for Infra showing these lovely, leafy, urban areas, but you don't get to spend much time in those. No, most of your time is spent in dark, dank, ugly places like this. And this. And this. Like 95% of your game time. These environments aren't only ugly, they're boring. And the reason they're boring is the utter flatness of the story and your mission. You're armed with a camera, and so from time to time, if you see something you think provides good evidence for why the structures are in such disrepair, you snap a photo of it. The game, in a rare bit of useful feedback, plays a particular sound effect when you have photographed something valuable. I think. I'm not actually sure that's true for reasons I'll get to later. But back to my point that playing Infra reminded me of better games. You know what game I kept thinking about while I stumbled through the endless, grotty, grease-stained, rust-encrusted industrial ruins that make up most of Infra's world? Riven. Seriously. In Riven, you stumbled around a lonely, mostly empty world solving puzzles without much obvious direction. That's kind of what I'm complaining about in Infra, right? Not so fast. First of all, Riven was stunningly beautiful. And the environments, while mute and somewhat passive, were drenched with atmosphere and mystery. And most crucially, as you solved puzzles, you began to get a sense of the connectedness of the world you found yourself in. Not so much with Infra. Generally, the only reason you're flipping levers and pressing buttons is that so that you can get out of the current ugly environment you're stuck into and get into the next ugly environment. In that way, Infra is pretty much one long obstacle course. In a game like Riven, and in many of the Myst clones that followed it, the more puzzles you solved, the more you felt you understood about the world you were exploring. Infra, by contrast, offers you a flat as a pancake experience. Other than the shocking realization that, spoiler alert, the city's infrastructure is crumbling due to greed and corruption, nothing grows as you drag yourself from one ugly metallic dungeon to the next. It's just figure out what buttons to push so you can continue to move forward. That's it. The game is a relentless parade of connect these circuits type puzzles. One with water tubes and pools that has to be done in several stages is particularly tedious and is made even worse by the presence of a bug that impedes progress. It feels like your only goal is get from here to over there. And you can even miss that if you miss anything the main character says when he's either muttering under his breath in almost incomprehensible English or calling his boss. You can't go back to rehear or reread any of those instructions. Have I mentioned the interface? Well, I don't like it either. You cannot customize the controls, and this leads to problems. As I mentioned before, many of the game's environments are very dark, which means you cannot accomplish whatever boring thing you need to accomplish there without using your flashlight. And your flashlight goes through batteries like Tony Montana goes through mounds of cocaine. You're constantly in fear of running out of batteries because if you do, you basically become permanently stuck in the game. And in their great wisdom, the designers place the key for turning on and off the flashlight right next to the button for reloading the flashlight batteries. So if you're not incredibly careful, you end up ejecting a perfectly good battery, which of course you cannot retrieve. And while the game does tell you how to do certain key activities, crouch, take out the camera, shoot a picture, turn on the flashlight, etc., it tells you how to do each thing only once, and if you forget it, you're screwed. There's nowhere to look up the controls. Again, that's something you learn in grown-up game design camp, fellas. The game also includes jumping puzzles, which the control scheme and engine don't really handle very well. Remember I mentioned earlier that I thought the noise I got when I took a certain photograph was feedback that I'd snapped a correct photograph? The reason I was tentative was that this is only part 1 of the game. After all the rusty drain pipe slogs, after all the ugly graffiti festooned walls, after all the button pushing and lever pulling, my poor structural analyst never even made it back to the office. The game ends with a long, tedious, timed puzzle that when you finally manage to get it right, you think, the game foists every gamer's favorite thing, a forced failure on you. And then the credits roll. Notice I didn't say after a card or narration or something telling you what to look forward to in the next exciting episode of Infra. The game just stops. Remember the end of part 1 of the most recent Broken Sword game? They did it properly. I was left thinking, cool, can't wait to get to the next part and see what happens. Not so much with Infra Part 1. In fact, in the spirit of the ending of Infra, I think I'll just end my review like